Welcome to the deep dive. We are here to cut through the well-known narratives and really try to understand the story behind the celebrity.
Mm.
Today, we're taking an extensive look into the life of Gary Wayne Coleman, a man who is just synonymous with childhood stardom. His life from 1968 to 2010 was a really profound and difficult blend of immense public success and just relentless private hardship.
And we have compiled and synthesized a really substantial body of source material for this, a collection of details that document his career at its zenith, the grueling health struggles that began almost at birth, the devastating financial battles, and the controversial events that sadly defined his adulthood.
Yeah.
Our mission is, I think, pretty critical. We need to move far beyond the classic catchphrases and truly grasp the full scope of the foundational challenges he faced throughout his entire 42 years.
And the sources immediately demand a certain measure of empathy. We're not just conducting a career retrospective here. We're analyzing a life that was marked by significant and, frankly, systemic obstacles from the very beginning. It's so crucial to set the stage by just confirming the sheer scale of his influence. I mean, Gary Coleman was rated first on VH1's list of 100 greatest kid stars.
Number one.
Number one. It validates his monumental cultural impact, but the irony is just, it's tragic. Almost immediately after that peak of fame, his adult life was just consumed by health, legal, and financial burdens that often stemmed directly from the circumstances of his childhood fame and his underlying medical reality.
It's the ultimate dichotomy of child stardom, isn't it?
Yeah.
You see the overwhelming success on screen, the charisma, the talent, the staggering income, and then you find it's juxtaposed with the private struggle that was often just relentless and debilitating.
Right.
To understand the trajectory of his life, we have to first dive deep into the physical and medical realities that shaped his entire existence well before he ever stepped onto a television set.
So Gary Wayne Coleman was born on February 8, 1968 in Zion, Illinois. He was adopted by a loving family, W.G. Coleman, who worked as a forklift operator, and Edmonia Sue, a nurse practitioner. But his early life was instantly dominated by this critical health condition that it determined his physical appearance, his life expectancy, and, in a really twisted turn of fate, so much of his career trajectory.
That condition was focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, or FSGS. And this isn't just a kidney problem, it's a severe disease that causes scarring in the filtering units of the kidney, the glomeruli.
Right.
For Coleman, this meant his kidneys were constantly failing. It was a chronic, life-threatening situation that demanded immediate and intense medical intervention, basically from infancy.
The documentation we've reviewed, it paints a picture of just a constant medical battle. He underwent 2 major kidney transplants. Both were ultimately unsuccessful in providing any kind of permanent solution.
Yeah, the first one was in 1973. He was just 5 years old.
5, a time when most kids are just starting school.
Exactly. The second followed a decade later in 1984.
And all this necessitated ongoing, lifelong dialysis.
Which is a brutal process, especially for a child. I mean, it requires the mechanical filtering of blood to remove waste and excess fluid, a function his kidneys just couldn't perform effectively. This wasn't something he did occasionally. It was a constant, time-consuming regimen that dictated his daily life, even at the absolute height of his fame.
And the physical outcomes of this treatment, they're so crucial to understanding his public image. The medications used to manage the kidney disease and, prevent transplant rejections, specifically corticosteroids, they're powerful drugs.
The very serious side effects.
Exactly. These drugs were directly responsible for limiting his physical growth.
That's correct. And that's why his adult height was only 4 feet 8 inches, so 142 centimeters. And more significantly, the corticosteroids and the illness itself maintained his very distinctive, perpetually youthful, childlike appearance well into his late 20s and beyond.
Long after his peers had physically matured.
Right. This physical reality, this constant reminder of his health struggle, it became intrinsically linked to his commercial appeal and the roles he was offered.
And even with this intense medical backdrop, his natural charisma it shone through so early. By 1974, at 6 years old, he was already working. He got a role in an episode of the TV drama Medical Center, and then there was that very memorable commercial for Harris Bank.
Oh yeah, the one with the line, "You should have a Hubert doll," which was referencing the bank's stuffed lion mascot.
That's the one.
These were significant early steps, showing he had a natural aptitude for comedy and timing. The pivotal moment, though, that came in 1977.
That was when he appeared in a pilot for a proposed revival of The Little Rascals. He was playing the character Stymie. And while the series itself never happened, his performance in that pilot, it caught the attention of an influential executive.
And that prompted a screen test for a brand new series.
Which was, of course, Diff'rent Strokes.
And his sheer magnetic presence just secured him the role of Arnold Jackson in 1978, the character that would, forever define his public identity.
And the premise of Diff'rent Strokes it was quite unique and progressive for its time. It focused on complex social themes. The show centered on two black brothers, Arnold and Willis from Harlem,
Played by Coleman and Todd Bridges.
who were adopted by a wealthy white widower, Philip Drummond, and his daughter Kimberly in a penthouse on Park Avenue in Manhattan.
The show premiered in 1978 and became an instant massive hit. It aired for 8 seasons until 1986. And Coleman's character, Arnold Jackson, he was the absolute centerpiece.
Of course.
His character delivered what is arguably one of television's most iconic and, skeptical catchphrases, a line that became part of the cultural lexicon. What you talking about, Willis?
Yeah.
The success of that show just vaulted him into an unprecedented sphere of fame.
And as we move into that era of peak fame, it's just so necessary to keep that medical context, the dialysis, the steroids, the constant fight against rejection in mind. It provides such a sobering background to what was, on the surface, a Cinderella story of professional success.
That sobering background is essential because this period, it marks the absolute zenith of his professional career. Gary Coleman became, for a time, the highest-paid child actor on television, globally.
And the status wasn't just symbolic, it was reflected in his colossal salary.
Yeah, the exact figures are.
Yeah.
They're astounding.
They are. The sources confirm that during his prime on Diff'rent Strokes, he was earning $100,000 per episode.
$100,000 an episode.
If we bring that number into the present day, adjusting for inflation, that single episode payday is the equivalent of over $388,000 in 2025.
It's an immense income stream, generated entirely by a young boy managing a chronic, life-threatening illness.
And this financial valuation was validated by critical acclaim and awards. For his performance as Arnold Jackson, he won the People's Choice Award for Favorite Young TV Performer 3 years in a row.
From 1980 to 1983, yeah. He also received 2 Young Artist Awards, one recognizing his outstanding contribution to youth through entertainment in 1980, and another for Best Young Actor in a Comedy Series in 1982. He was truly a superstar.
And it wasn't enough for the network to just have him on the sitcom. They immediately launched what you could call the Gary Coleman stardom machine to maximize the financial return on his unique appeal. This meant full media saturation.
The goal was to leverage the Arnold Jackson brand everywhere. This included mandated crossover roles in other popular sitcoms within the NBC universe. He appeared in Hello, Larry in 1979.
Right.
Made appearances on The Facts of Life between 79 and 80. And even had a guest spot on Silver Spoons in 1982. They strategically planted him in other high-profile series like The Jeffersons and Good Times just to broaden his exposure.
And they even gave him his own animated vehicle, The Gary Coleman Show, which premiered in 1982.
Where he voiced the lead, Andy LeBeau, who was an angel in training. The sources also highlight these television films that were specifically created to capitalize on his appeal, like The Kid from Left Field in 1979. NBC produced that explicitly to enhance his name recognition and commercial value.
And that strategy worked. The Kid from Left Field was one of the highest-rated shows the week it aired. He was also pushed into feature films. The first was the 1981 comedy On the Right Track.
And the plot was almost secondary to his star power. He played Lester, an orphan who lives in a train station locker. This role, it tapped into his genuine love for trains, with sources noting the script was rewritten specifically to accommodate him.
The film was commercially successful. It grossed $13 million at the box office and pulled in another, $10 to $15 million in home video rentals?
Mm-hmm.
And despite its formulaic nature, critics generally praised Coleman's performance. They called him a solid actor in his first lead motion picture role. He was just undeniably talented, able to elevate the material around him.
However, the next film, in 1982, Jimmy the Kid, it sort of signaled that the stardom machine was starting to prioritize speed and profit over quality. It was financially successful, yes, but it was critically ravaged. Roger Ebert's review was especially biting. He observed that films like this were written by formula, cast by computer, and directed by the book. The critical assessment suggested that the process was just overwhelming any spontaneous talent Coleman brought to the role.
This critique really highlights the hidden cost of that stardom machine, which becomes even darker when you combine it with his severe medical condition. The high-pressure, relentless production schedule was incredibly demanding on a child who needed constant medical care.
And this is where we confront the painful reality that's documented in the sources. Todd Bridges, his co-star, recounted in his autobiography, Killing Willis, the pressure Coleman faced.
Yeah.
Bridges alleged that Coleman was frequently forced to work grueling long hours on the set of Diff'rent Strokes, despite his debilitating chronic health problems. I mean, imagine needing dialysis and managing rejection medications while maintaining a demanding schedule. The emotional and physical toll would just be immense.
And Bridges stated that this pressure led Coleman to become increasingly depressed and withdrawn from the cast. It's such a stark contrast to the image of the happy, witty Arnold Jackson they were projecting to millions of viewers every week. We see a brief attempt to sort of transition his image in 1985 with the television film Playing with Fire, where he took on his first serious dramatic role as a teenage arsonist.
But by then, the public had this immovable image of him. The adult roles just weren't materializing. And while the money was astronomical on paper, the financial side also contained a systemic flaw that would, well, destroy him later.
Yeah, that Biography Channel documentary.
Right. It estimated that after covering the cost of his parents, his advisors, his lawyers, and of course taxes, Coleman was left with only about a quarter of the vast amount of money he'd earned during his peak years on Diff'rent Strokes.
Just 1/4 remaining. Oh. And that specific detail, it foreshadows the massive legal battles that dominated the next decade of his life, turning a multi-million-dollar fortune into persistent debt.
So when Diff'rent Strokes was canceled in 1986, that primary source of massive income,
right,
it just evaporated instantly.
Right.
This forced Coleman to confront the grim, complicated reality of his finances, leading directly to the trust fund crisis that became public knowledge.
The trust fund, which was established to protect his earnings, was allegedly worth $3.8 million. But in 1989, Coleman initiated a major lawsuit against both his adoptive parents, W.G. and Edmonia Sue Coleman, and his former business advisor,
alleging gross misappropriation of those funds.
Exactly. And he was legally successful, which is so important to remember. In 1993, he won a judgment of $1.28 million.
Which, adjusted for inflation, is worth over $2.8 million in today's money. So the judgment confirmed that a significant portion of his wealth had indeed been mismanaged or diverted, validating his allegations in court.
But this is where the core insight has to be synthesized. The legal system granted him a victory of principle, justice for past financial wrongs. Yet the outcome failed entirely to insulate him from the crushing reality of his ongoing future financial demands.
Especially his medical debt. Yes. He won the legal battle for $1.28 million, but the war against chronic health expenses and the systemic failures that cost him the other 2/3 of his original fortune, that ensured he was perpetually vulnerable.
So despite his successful judgment, he still found himself just spiraling into financial instability.
That earlier documentary estimate that he was left with only a fraction of his original money after all the settlements, fees, and expenses, it just shows how thoroughly the infrastructure designed to protect him had failed.
Which led to the inevitable conclusion. In August 1999, Gary Coleman filed for bankruptcy protection.
And his own explanation for the insolvency is provided in the source material, and it conveys this deep sense of systemic failure and betrayal.
It does. When discussing the financial ruin, Coleman claimed that responsibility for his insolvency was widely distributed. He said it was, quote, "from me to accountants, to my adoptive parents, to agents, to lawyers, and back to me again."
It's a painful quote because it shows this profound sense of having been failed by every single protective mechanism that should have surrounded a child star.
And we can point to specific, tangible losses that accelerated this path. In 1995, he attempted a venture outside of the entertainment world. He opened an arcade business in Marina del Rey, California, called the Gary Coleman Game Parlor.
Right, and he lost $200,000 on that failed project.
$200,000. That loss alone is the equivalent of over $400,000 today. His attempts to forge a traditional business path were met with significant setbacks, further eroding the capital he desperately needed for his medical needs.
And that's the central aggravating factor throughout all of this. His relentless high-cost medical needs, his dependence on dialysis, medication, specialized care. It meant that even modest financial stability was impossible without consistent high-level income.
This necessity compelled him to resort to truly extraordinary and sometimes just absurd fundraising activities post-bankruptcy.
The most famous example detailed in the source is that 1999 online auction he held in partnership with UJ Networks. It was tellingly titled, Save Me.
Yeah.
This auction represented the extreme measure he was forced to take just to manage his life and his health expenses.
And you just have to think about the magnitude of this fall from grace. The man who earned $100,000 per episode was forced to auction off personal, intimate possessions.
Right. Items included his personal couch, an autographed ice scraper, and, well, most bizarrely, a tiny pimp suit with matching gold Nikes.
And these items garnered over $5,000 in bids, demonstrating the desperate lengths he went to for financial relief. The contrast between the wealthiest child star in the world and the man auctioning his used furniture just over a decade later it's one of the most painful reflections of his post-fame struggle. Once that primary income stream of Diff'rent Strokes ended in 1986, Coleman, like so many child stars before him, he struggled profoundly to transition into traditional adult acting roles.
He really did.
His distinctive appearance, linked so irrevocably to Arnold Jackson, made that shift just nearly impossible.
Indeed. The source material shows that the majority of his work as an adult consisted of guest appearances on television, where he often played himself, or a fictionalized version that parodied his own fame.
We see this pattern of playing a celebrity struggling to find work in a long list of shows.
You see it in The Simpsons, where he voiced himself, and on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, where he made a very memorable final appearance as Arnold Jackson.
Right. He also appeared on Married, with children, My Wife and Kids, and the film Dickie Roberts, former child star in 2003. And while these kept him visible, they also kept him trapped within the very identity he was trying to escape.
However, there was one specific area where Coleman made a genuinely groundbreaking contribution, voice acting in the burgeoning video game industry.
Yeah, that's right. In 1997, he voiced the character Kenny Falmouth in the beloved adventure game The Curse of Monkey Island.
And this was a big deal at the time. He was recognized as one of the first major mainstream actors, a television superstar, to lend his voice and likeness to a video game, which lent the medium a new sense of legitimacy.
And his performance was excellent. It proved his talent extended well beyond live-action comedy. The Curse of Monkey Island is still regarded as one of the best games in its genre, and one critic noted that Coleman played wonderfully a shifty character.
It confirms that when he was given material that leveraged his vocal skills outside the constraints of his child star image, his talent was just undeniable.
He later dipped into the other end of the gaming spectrum, appearing in a much more controversial title, Postal 2, in 2003, portraying a highly fictionalized version of himself.
He even appeared in the intro to the sequel, Postal 3rd, in 2011, and the expansion pack for Postal 2, Paradise Lost, in 2015, showing a recurring relationship with that specific gaming franchise.
Beyond entertainment, Coleman made a surprising and very public foray into politics in 2003.
Ah, yes, during the highly publicized California recall election for governor, which featured a really unusual slate of candidates.
His candidacy was an independent run, and the sources clarify the intent. He was sponsored by the Free News Weekly, the East Bay Express, which used his celebrity candidacy as a satirical comment on the political circus and the absurdity of the recall process itself.
Despite the nature of the campaign, though, he managed to achieve a respectable outcome. He placed 8th in a field of 135 candidates.
8th place, yeah, receiving 14,242 votes. Following his own campaign, he announced that he would vote for Arnold Schwarzenegger, who ultimately won the governorship. It really highlights the power of celebrity even when the campaign itself is meant as a joke.
It does.
This era also featured other notable pop culture references that played directly on his 1980s fame. In 2005, he starred in John Cena's music video for the single Bad Bad Man.
The video was a deliberate spoof of 1980s culture, riffing on the aesthetics of shows like The A-Team. Coleman played the villain, demonstrating his willingness to lean into the self-parody that characterized so much of his adult work.
And his final television role was a voice part in the animated series Robot Chicken. Even in his last performances, the narrative of his life, the unavoidable fame, and the difficulty of escaping it, it was always present.
So, before we delve into the deeply stressful aspects of his personal and public life in his later years, the sources offer a brief but incredibly humanizing glimpse into his personal reprieve.
His deep passion for railroads.
Exactly. It's a moment of quiet dignity amidst the chaos. Gary Coleman was an avid railroad fan and model train enthusiast. He sought out this interest by working part-time in hobby stores across the Denver, Tucson, and California areas, not for the money, but simply to be around his hobby.
Yeah.
He spent considerable time in the 1990s building and maintaining these intricate miniature railroads in his homes.
This passion for trains, it really represented a desire for normalcy, structure, and control in a life where external forces were just constantly chaotic.
The sources note that at least one of his model railroads is currently being preserved in Colorado Springs, Colorado, a tangible relic of his quiet, non-celebrity life.
Unfortunately, that sense of control was often entirely absent from his highly scrutinized public and personal life. In early 2007, he met Shannon Price, who was 22, on the set of the film Church Ball.
And they married just a few months later.
Their relationship was volatile from the start, and it quickly became a public spectacle. In May 2008, they famously appeared on the television show Divorce Court, attempting to publicly air their differences and salvage the marriage.
That attempt failed, and they divorced just 3 months later in August 2008.
The separation was acrimonious. Immediately following the divorce, Coleman was granted an ex parte restraining order, which is a temporary order granted by a judge without the other party being present.
Right, specifically to prevent Price from living in his home while he was hospitalized. This shows the immediate level of conflict and distrust right in the wake of the split.
And the relationship remained complicated even after the divorce, which led to a major legal battle following his death. Price later filed a court petition claiming they had continued to live together and function as a common-law couple until his death.
Which would have made her his legal heir.
Exactly. But the judge ultimately ruled against her in May 2012, 4 years after the official divorce.
And the ruling against Price was incredibly detailed. It relied on devastating testimony presented in court, which painted this picture of deep personal turmoil in Coleman's final years.
The testimony cited in the source material alleged that Price engaged in love affairs with other men while simultaneously claiming to be his common-law wife. Crucially, the testimony stated that she physically abused Coleman in public, that she laid him around by the hand like a child, and that she displayed no physical affection toward him in front of anyone.
And the judge's reasoning was specific. These actions invalidated the common-law marriage claim because they failed to meet Utah's standard requirement of mutually holding themselves out to the public as married. The testimony demonstrated a painful loss of dignity and stability for Coleman, underscoring the intense personal hardship he was enduring while largely out of the spotlight.
This constant pressure and intrusion also manifested in a series of highly publicized legal incidents and public altercations. And it's so critical to view these events through the lens of a man who spent his life battling illness, financial ruin, and the constant erosion of his personal space.
The first major incident occurred in 1998 in a Los Angeles mall. Coleman was shopping for a bulletproof vest when Tracy Fields, a bus driver and a Diff'rent Strokes fan, approached him for an autograph.
When he refused to personalize it, an argument ensued. Fields reportedly mocked his acting career and his height.
The confrontation escalated to the point where Coleman punched her in the face. When defending his actions in court, Coleman alleged that he felt genuinely threatened by Fields, stating, "She wouldn't leave me alone. I was getting scared and she was getting ugly."
He pleaded no contest to one count of assault, received a suspended jail sentence, and was ordered to pay Fields' $1,665 hospital bill and attend anger management classes. The profound frustration of that moment, where a simple private errand resulted in intense conflict because of his fame, must have just been immense.
And the pattern of conflict continued. In 2007, he was cited for misdemeanor disorderly conduct in Provo, Utah, after a heated discussion with Shannon Price in public. This was followed by a more serious incident in 2008 at a Payson, Utah bowling alley.
That altercation began after Colt Rushton, a 24-year-old, photographed Coleman without permission.
Witnesses confirmed the argument began over the invasion of privacy. The confrontation moved into the parking lot, where sources claimed Coleman, in a fit of rage or frustration, backed his truck into Rushton, striking his knee and pulling him partially under the vehicle before colliding with another car.
Rushton received treatment for minor injuries. Coleman ultimately pleaded no contest to disorderly conduct and reckless driving and received a fine of $100. The incident highlighted the enormous difficulty he had maintaining boundaries and composure under the perpetual pressure of fame.
Even in the final months of his life, the instability continued. He and Price continued to have domestic disputes in 2009, leading to her arrest on suspicion of domestic violence, although both were eventually cited for disorderly conduct.
And just months before his death in 2010, he was arrested again on an outstanding domestic assault warrant in Santaquin, Utah, only to be released the next day. These constant legal challenges just underscore a life that was devoid of true privacy and stability.
The tragic conclusion to Gary Coleman's life began on May 26, 2010. at his home in Santaquin, Utah. The details of the fatal accident are harrowing. He fell down the stairs and struck his head.
And it is noted in the sources that the fall may have occurred after another seizure, something he had been hospitalized for earlier that same year in January and February.
The trauma from the fall resulted in an epidural hematoma. It's a serious and often rapidly fatal pooling of blood between the brain and the skull.
He was admitted to Utah Valley Regional Medical Center in Provo in critical condition. Initially, reports suggested a brief period of lucidity the next morning. However, his condition rapidly worsened.
By the afternoon of May 27th, he was unconscious and placed on life support. He died the following day, May 28, 2010, at the age of 42.
The pain of his death was immediately followed by a deeply contentious legal and ethical dispute regarding the discontinuation of life support and the disposition of his estate.
Right. Shannon Price authorized the hospital to pull life support, which instantly raised questions about her legal authority, given that they had officially divorced 2 years prior.
And the hospital had to formally clarify the situation. They issued a statement confirming that Coleman had signed an advance healthcare directive,
Which is a legal document that explicitly granted Price permission to make critical medical decisions on his behalf, so it validated her authority in that profound moment.
The dispute then shifted to his final wishes and his remains, which halted his scheduled funeral. And the core of this controversy rested on the existence of two conflicting wills.
The first will, drafted in 1999, named his former manager, Dion Mull, as the executor. This will contained a profoundly moving and poignant stipulation regarding his wake. He directed that the ceremony be, quote, conducted by those with no financial ties to me and can look each other in the eyes and say they really cared personally for Gary Coleman.
That stipulation speaks volumes about his deep distrust of the people who surrounded him during his professional career. It expresses a desperate wish for genuine, selfless human connection to manage his final arrangements.
But this 1999 document was superseded by a later will, drafted in 2005.
The 2005 will replaced Mull with a former business associate, Anna Gray, as executor. The key difference was the explicit and final direction that there be, quote, no funeral service, wake, or other ceremony memorializing my passing.
This instruction added another layer of complexity to an already emotional and painful legal situation.
And Price, attempting to inherit his estate, was the one who filed the petition claiming she was his common-law wife until his death, arguing that they had continued to live together and share bank accounts.
But, as we discussed earlier, the judge ultimately rejected this claim in May 2012, solidifying the validity of the 2005 will, which named Anna Gray as the executor.
Yeah. The judge determined the relationship failed to meet the legal criteria for a common-law marriage in Utah, especially in light of the testimony regarding Price's public behavior, abuse, and alleged affairs.
Following the legal conclusion, the Santaquin police investigation into his death was officially closed in October 2010. The medical examiner ruled the death accidental, concluding that there was no evidence of foul play or wrongdoing.
The final, saddest detail in this tumultuous life story is the status of his physical remains. To this day, the disposition of Gary Coleman's ashes remains unknown.
Price had stated that if she had been granted disposition, she would have scattered them at the Golden Spike National Historic Site in Utah, a tribute to his lifelong and very deep love of trains. This final ambiguity contrasts so sharply with the enormous, constant public scrutiny he endured throughout his entire life.
Looking back, Gary Coleman remains consistently listed as one of the most influential child actors in history. His rating as #1 on that VH1 list confirms his lasting significance.
MTV further emphasized this impact, stating that he left an undeniable impact on pop culture. Yet this wide cultural adoration must always be filtered through the knowledge of his private suffering, making critical reflection absolutely essential.
Mike Hogan from Vanity Fair offered a stark and necessary assessment of his career. Hogan acknowledged Coleman was unquestionably a superstar, overshadowing others with his radiant charisma and boundless energy.
But he directly connected this success to his medical condition, observing that the kidney disease, which allowed him to play the childlike role, also complicated his life in ways most of us will never understand.
His success was intrinsically linked to his affliction.
And we even have a fascinating piece of historical praise from 1980, when Lucille Ball, the queen of comedy herself, admitted she rarely watched sitcoms, but stated explicitly, "I love Gary Coleman. He puts me away. He puts everybody away."
Wow.
This speaks volumes about the sheer, undeniable generational talent he possessed that transcended demographic boundaries.
Perhaps one of the most enduring, if satirical, acknowledgments of his complex legacy is his portrayal in the Tony-winning musical Avenue Q.
Right. The musical features a fictionalized version of Gary Coleman, who works as the superintendent of the apartment complex, perpetually lamenting his dashed celebrity dreams.
In the character song, It Sucks to Be Me, he expresses this deep frustration. The creators of Avenue Q, Jeff Marks and Robert Lopez, were intentional about this portrayal.
They were. They explained that the character personified a profound societal theme: the cruelty of a world where children are told they are special and destined for greatness, only to enter adulthood and discover that life is often far more difficult than they were led to believe, particularly for former stars. The character serves as a powerful symbol for failure to launch and the adult world's indifference.
The sources mention that the creators originally hoped Coleman himself would take the role, and he even expressed interest. However, he never showed up for the meeting to discuss it, which perhaps highlights his complex and volatile relationship with the very idea of monetizing his post-fame identity.
Yeah, in 2005, he announced an intention to sue the producers for his depiction, telling a Comic-Con audience in 2007, "I wish there was a lawyer on Earth that would sue them for me," though the lawsuit never materialized.
But following his death in 2010, the casts of both the off-Broadway production and the national tour of Avenue Q dedicated performances to his memory, with the actors playing the Coleman role offering tributes from the stage.
It shows how even the satirical portrayal was rooted in a genuine, if complicated, recognition of his cultural footprint and personal struggles.
And in terms of modern recognition, his memory continues to be honored, notably with the 2021 Diff'rent Strokes special, where actor Kevin Hart played his signature character of Arnold Jackson for a new audience.
And in 2024, the documentary Gary was released on Peacock, signaling that cultural interest in truly understanding his life story has not faded.
The sources we've examined today detail a life caught in this painful squeeze between the overwhelming weight of public adoration and crushing private burdens, medical, financial, and legal. He was a truly generational talent who, due to circumstances related to his profound health issues and the flawed machinery of Hollywood, never truly escapes the role that defined him.
The sheer, relentless impact of his focal segmental glomerulosclerosis was not simply a medical condition. It was a central driver of his career trajectory, his enduring physical vulnerability, and his persistent financial desperation throughout his entire adult life.
This brings us back to the central tragic irony we identified earlier. Gary Coleman successfully sued for the misuse of his childhood fortune, legally winning a multi-million-dollar judgment against the people who stole from him.
But here's the provocative point that the sources demand we consider. Even with that legal victory, the complexities of his chronic health issues and the resulting lifelong medical expenses meant he was perpetually struggling afterward. He was forced to auction his personal belongings for relief and ultimately died without financial security.
So what can we truly learn about the difference between winning a legal battle for past injustices and achieving genuine, lasting financial and personal security when life has stacked the deck against you from such an early foundational age?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into a powerful, complex, and tragic American story. We encourage you to keep seeking knowledge and understanding from the sources around you.